This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The German newspaper Die Zeit reported that the German Interior Minister called for all European newspapers to republish cartoons that defame the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Despite acknowledging the defamatory nature of these cartoons, the German minister said that this step aims at defending the freedom of the press.
Tens of thousands of Sudanese demonstrated in the capital of Khartoum, protesting the reprinting of some of the cartoons which defame the Prophet, peace be upon him, by Danish papers. Demonstrators chanted slogans opposing Denmark. They also raised banners calling Arab and Islamic countries to boycott Danish merchandise and goods. For his part, the Sudanese president, Omar al-Bashir, who gave a speech to the demonstrators, passed a decree prohibiting Danish citizens from entering Sudan and boycotting all Danish products.
We are joined from Berlin with our Al Jazeera correspondent Hussam Shehdat. Hussam, what exactly did the German Interior Minister say in the Die Zeit newspaper?
في الواقع تلقينا هاتفا قبل قليل من وزارة الداخلية الألمانية تنفي فيه نفيا تاما.
A short while ago, we received a phone call from the German Interior Ministry dismissing what has been reported by news agencies. The spokeswoman for the German Interior Ministry said that the minister did not make such remarks. He only called for the freedom of expression. The minister described the cartoons as a regrettable incident and said if Danish newspapers have published them, then it's part of free press, which we all must respect. We can read the entire interview with the minister in tomorrow's edition. However, the Die Zeit newspaper, through its website, said the minister urged all European newspapers to republish these cartoons, which he says are part of free press, which we all must respect.
From the north, east, and south, the Israeli killing machinery carried out air raids in the Gaza Strip, murdering 9 activists from the Qassam Brigades, the military wing for Hamas, and the Jerusalem Brigades, the military wing for the Islamic Jihad. The new raids come after the Palestinian resistance launched cross-border rocket attacks on Israeli settlements along the borders with Gaza. Palestinian rocket attack was met by condemnations from the Palestinian Authority from one side and raids by the occupation on the other.
It is a series with many episodes in which Israel is playing the role of the dishonored hero. In today's episode, several Palestinian activists from the Qassam brigades were martyred and several others were wounded after Israeli fighters fired missiles targeting 2 cars in the city of Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. The situation is not better along the eastern borders of the Gaza Strip, where a Palestinian activist from the Jerusalem brigades was martyred in clashes with an Israeli special force trying to infiltrate into the area.
This is a proof that the Zionist enemy is not serious about reaching a cooling-off period or consensus with the Palestinians. The occupation is buying time in order to commit more crimes, carry out more aggressions, and kill more Palestinians.
These images of the fallen martyrs and wounded are not new to the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the occupation blamed the rockets of the resistance for the escalation. Now, some closed and distant groups are calling for an end to Palestinian rocket attacks because such attacks are giving the occupation a reason to assault Gaza.
In the previous years, we used to witness occasional ceasefire and cooling-off periods. Israel has always violated the ceasefire in order to escalate its aggression in Gaza and runs away from a serious political commitment or consensus with the Palestinians.
The political equation of the Gaza Strip is very clear. On one side of the equation, Israel is continuing its assaults on the Palestinians in order to inflict more harm and increase their pain and suffering. On the other side, the Palestinian resistance is not willing to leave room for talks as long as the occupation is continuing. Without a doubt, the crisis in the Gaza Strip requires a political solution as long as it is within the national interests of the Palestinian people. Several rounds of talks are underway, including some that were made public and others that were not disclosed.
The deteriorating situation in the Palestinian territories is one of the files being discussed in the Saudi-Jordanian summit underway in Riyadh. This news comes as King Abdullah II of Jordan held talks with the servant of the two noble sanctuaries, King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz. The two leaders are expected to discuss the Lebanese presidential crisis along with the upcoming Arab summit scheduled for next month in Damascus. Egypt increased the number of police officers deployed along the borders with the Gaza Strip, who are coordinating with Israel, which warned that it will resort to carrying out a military operation if the Egyptians are unable to close the gaps along the border areas. This warning came from the chief of the Israeli Army Intelligence Agency, who said that explosive experts entered Gaza after the collapse of the Rafah border wall, and that global jihadists succeeded in getting members of Qaeda into Gaza.
The current situation in Gaza is fertile ground for the spread of Al-Qaeda. This, at least, is the warning being made by observers who say that Al-Qaeda and other satellite organizations are increasingly trying to get involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They add that the chaos which is deepening in the Gaza Strip may be paving the way for the emergence of sympathetic forces to extremist groups or those that resort to violence and terrorism. The observers raise these concerns because they see what is being published on some websites and extremist forums on the internet which are calling for fighting and urging for jihad. Such calls are particularly directed towards young Palestinian men and inciting them to welcome fighters who may come from foreign countries. What strengthened the conviction of the increasing danger of Al-Qaeda towards Israel were warnings which surfaced after the destruction of part of the border wall between Egypt and the Gaza Strip, as well as the news that reported on the infiltration of fighters and terrorists. Israeli media and some security experts have focused on the information that indicates the possibility that many members of Al-Qaeda or its followers have infiltrated Gaza, with the aim of carrying out operations against Israel. Analysts say that if Al-Qaeda organizations or their affiliates succeed in carrying out operations inside Israel, then Hamas, which controls Gaza, may avoid, at least officially, providing support for these members or extremist forces. Hani Abu Ayyash, Al-Arabiya.
Just one day after Ariel Sharon turned 80 years old, his son, former Knesset member Omri Sharon, went to jail. Omri will serve a 7-month sentence for corruption and fraud in connection with Ariel Sharon's Likud party leadership campaign 9 years ago. IBA's Leah Stern reports.
Omri Sharon, once among the most influential politicians in the country, headed off to jail today. He has become the first public figure in Israel to go to prison for election fraud. The former MK was taken from Tel Aviv District Court to a minimum security prison near Ramleh, where he will serve out a 7-month sentence. Sharon arrived at the court at 10 a.m. this morning after visiting his comatose father, former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, at the Sheba Medical Center at Tel HaShomer, and after taking his 3 daughters to kindergarten. He was greeted at the courthouse by a slew of journalists and a couple of far right-wing activists, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Baruch Marzel, who shouted out, "You should be ashamed of yourself. We will pursue you to your last day." They were referring not to Omri's crimes, but his support of the Gaza disengagement. Sharon was convicted of receiving and trying to hide illegal contributions from secret donors to his father's 1999 campaign for chairmanship of the Likud party. Sharon was initially sentenced in February 2007 to 9 months in jail and a fine of 300,000 shekels for making false entries in the documents of a corporate body, lying under oath, and violating sections of the political party's law. Omri appealed the sentence twice, all the way up to the Supreme Court. In late June 2007, the Tel Aviv District Court partially accepted an appeal by Sharon and reduced his jail sentence by 2 months, but insisted that he serve time in prison. The court did give consideration to Ariel Sharon's medical condition and postponed Omri's sentence for over half a year. Some people suggested that President Shimon Peres pardon Sharon, arguing that he has already suffered enough. But according to law, the request for pardon has to come from Sharon himself, who preferred to serve his time behind bars and put the affair behind him. This is Leah Stern for IBA News.
Now to another controversial public figure, former President Moshe Katsav consulted with his lawyers in Tel Aviv today. They discussed how to react to the state prosecutor's plan to attach the charge of moral disgrace to Katsav's alleged crimes. The prosecution is set to indict Katsav at the Jerusalem Magistrates Court tomorrow. This after the High Court of Justice upheld the plea bargain deal in which the former president agreed to plead guilty to charges of sexual harassment and indecent assault in exchange for a suspended jail sentence. Katsav's attorneys had threatened to back out of the plea bargain deal if the charge of moral disgrace is attached to the alleged crimes, but few observers believe they will make good on that threat. And meanwhile, 17 women's rights groups are set to march in protest at this hour from Rabin Square in Tel Aviv to the state attorney's office, demanding that the plea bargain deal with the former president be scrapped.
Iran and Qatar are determined to take advantage of all their potential to enhance cooperation. In talks with visiting Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said that the two sides share common stance when it comes to boosting bilateral ties, and added there are no limitations for expanding such relations between the two sides. President Ahmadinejad also underlined the need for execution of all the agreements sealed by the two countries on all fronts, energy in particular. The Qatari premier, for his part, urged enhancement of diplomatic ties between Iran and Qatar. The Guardian Council has approved the qualification of another 49 hopefuls to run in the March 14th parliamentary elections in Iran. They were among hopefuls whose qualification had not been authorized in the first round of examination. The Council's spokesman Abbas Ali Katkhodai said the definite list of those candidates who will compete in the elections will be announced on the 3rd of March. The Council begins Wednesday its final re-examination process for the remaining disqualified candidates on appeal. Tehran warns that the ongoing efforts by certain countries which are poised to mislead international bodies about Iran's peaceful nuclear activities will further discredit the UN Security Council and undermine the status of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Foreign Minister Manucher Mottaki, in a letter to his counterparts from the countries membering the Governors Board of the IAEA, has advised the opponents of Iran's atomic plan to make up for their wrong approaches in that respect. The top diplomat has in the letter underlined now that the recent report by the UN Nuclear Monitoring Agency has for the 11th time proved non-diversion of Iran's civilian atomic work, it provides further proof that the previous UN resolutions against Iran have been devoid of any legal or technical justification. Assistant UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Erika Feller, is praising Iran's efforts in settling and supporting Afghan refugees in the country. Speaking at a news conference in Tehran, the UN official briefed reporters on the outcomes of her visit to Iran.
We've cooperated, I believe, closely with the authorities in trying to improve the situation of the refugees in this country, make it easier for them to stay, make it easier for the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran to host them. We have also worked very actively inside Afghanistan with a view to improving the kind of conditions that people face when they go back, to make it easier for people to go back, to make it easier for them to begin their life again in their own country. We are, as an organization, committed to continuing to work on both these fronts.
Using Bush's terminology in the new Iraq, violence is killing dozens of people daily due to scattered explosions and attacks. The prime victims are the children of Iraq.
According to his leaders, Bush wants Iraqis to live a life of dignity. However, reality indicates that the children of Iraq are dying of starvation and disease. Who will save them?
Surveys released by international organizations regarding cancer in Iraq confirm that cancer has been notably spreading in the country. This dire health reality reflects difficult humanitarian suffering. Women and children are suffering from cancer.
It's sad that in Iraq the number of doctors has fallen to only 17,000. In advanced countries, there is one doctor for every 450 people. We need at least 5 times this number of doctors. We need 5 times that number of nurses. There is a major shortage of doctors in Iraq. There's also a shortage of nurses, drugs, and capabilities.
This disease has been notably spreading in the old areas and poor neighborhoods. One of the reasons for this is negligence in maintaining the sewage systems, which sometimes mix refuse water with drinking water, creating a fertile ground for this disease to spread.
According to the Ministry of Environment, the environment in Iraq is being polluted in a troublesome way. There are other reasons for this. Even the lack of nutrition can cause cancer. There are physical, chemical, and environmental causes. Environment and chemical pollution as well as radiation all lead to cancer, or what are called heavy metals.
The Ansari neighborhood in the city of Najaf is an example, representing many other neighborhoods in Iraq where cancer has spread amongst many of its residents. Officials said that the residents there are living in an unhealthy environment or may have used instruments that polluted the environment with radiation and chemicals. The other reason, which is the main cause behind the spread of cancer in Iraq, is no secret to the world. The American occupation and its smart and dumb bombs, which have hit cities and neighborhoods in the country extending from the north to south, using internationally banned weapons, thus increasing the pain and suffering of the people.
In Basra, they said the main cause for cancer was the weapons that were used during the Gulf War. However, I can confirm to you that this is not the main cause. There are other causes.
Cancer is a disease which is inflicting Iraqis. Will anyone save them amidst these miserable conditions? Meanwhile, the presence of the occupation forces is a factor leading to the spread of the cancer.
Baghdad is calling for an immediate withdrawal of Turkish troops from northern Iraq, but Ankara is refusing to set a timetable to pull its troops out. The first pictures have emerged of what the PKK says is the wreckage of a Turkish helicopter.
The PKK claims it was shot down on Saturday. As Turkish troops continue their week-long search for Kurdish fighters in northern Iraq, Turkey's special envoy in Baghdad has been talking to Iraq's leaders. But as Mike Hanna reports, the face-to-face talks have failed to ease tensions.
A handshake between the Turkish envoy and Iraq's foreign minister, their friendly relationship now under severe strain. These talks aimed at breaking an apparent stalemate Iraq insisting that the Turkish forces withdraw immediately, Turkey adamant that it will continue operations against the PKK for as long as necessary.
We hope that it will be ended as soon as possible. We hope that these forces will withdraw immediately because we fear the escalation, in fact. We fear that this could lead to further escalation and instability. And the visit of the Turkish delegation is very timely, very useful. I think it has given us the opportunity to openly, frankly, in a brotherly way, convey our position and our concerns and fears, and also to listen from them too.
For us, the continuing operation is not a violation of Iraqi sovereignty, just the opposite. It is restoration of Iraqi sovereignty over those geography where terrorists are functioning. Here the objective is elimination of PKK terrorist activities there. Our objective is clear, our mission is clear, and there is no timetable until the terrorist presence there, which cannot be tolerated neither by Iraqi government, nor by us, nor by international community, until that terrorist bases are being eliminated. Thank you.
Iraq insistent, though, that the PKK must be dealt with on a joint basis, not a Turkish unilateral one.
The point of view from Baghdad is clear, that the crisis involving the PKK can only be dealt with through cooperation. Cooperation between Turkey, the Iraqi government, and the Kurdistan regional government as a component part of Iraq. In the past, Turkey has been reluctant to deal with the KRG. However, Baghdad now insistent that that entity is a vital part of addressing the problem of the PKK. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
During the years of war in Sudan, many Sudanese in the southern states were forced to leave their homes and relocate in camps in and around the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. Now that stability returned to the south, many decided to return to their homes, hoping for a new beginning to live in security and stability.
بيتر آيزاك أحد أبناء ولاية الوحدة بجنوب السودان جاء إلى الخرطوم قبل.
Peter Isaac is a resident of the Wahda state in southern Sudan. 7 years ago, Isaac relocated to Khartoum to escape from a war that turned his life into hell. Today, Isaac responded to the calls of peace and decided to return to his home in the city of Awil. Peter, who was accompanied by his wife and 4 children, left behind a trading job and some of his belongings.
Thank God the country is now stable. We will live and start a new life here. The situation continues to improve in the country.
This camp in Suba is the first stop for the hundreds of refugees before returning to their homes in the southern states. Despite the difficulties associated with the process of relocation, the refugees are expected to receive aid from various sources.
The returnees are receiving help from the refugee committees in the camp. The returnees are allowed to stay in the camp for 3 or 4 days, then they are on their way home.
After packing his luggage and joining his peers in preparation for a long journey, it's time for Peter to leave his temporary shelter in the town of Suba in Khartoum. The refugees who are returning to the state of Wahda are brought to this camp, dubbed Peace Camp, west of Durman, which is under the administration of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. After staying in the camp for a few days, the refugees embark on a long journey to the south. It's the season of migration to the south. According to the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs for the year 2008, more than 1.7 million displaced Sudanese are expected to return to their local areas in southern Sudan. Before they're allowed to enter one of the camps, the refugees have to go through a lengthy relocation process.
On the first day of arrival at the camp, the refugees are vaccinated. After staying here for a few days, the refugees are given enough supplies, such as food and blankets. Then they are ready to head south.
I've been away for a long time. I don't know what's in store for us in the south, whether it's aid or harm.
Amidst fear of the unknown, Peter hopes for a bright future and a stable life in the south. Meanwhile, Peter's children, who grew up in the north, are anxious to see the south, the land of their parents and grandparents.
خلينا نكفل الموضوع ايضا بنفس الاطار استاذ عبد المنعم الاعسم عندما تكون الولايات المتحده
Professor Abdel Menem Al-A'zam, why did the U.S. support Kosovo's independence despite Russian reservations? This independence forced many countries to make tough decisions, not only in the West, but also in our region. Iran, for example, opposes this independence, so does Cyprus, Spain, and many other countries, which have problems with minorities seeking independence. What is the American interest in setting such a precedent?
مثل ما بيقولوا بيت النحل.
نعم. يعني هو يعني من المبالغة القول أن
It is an exaggeration to say that the problem of Kosovo was caused by an American conspiracy. The problem has a history, as was previously mentioned. The Americans, however, interfered in this hotspot because they wanted to influence the course of events. I think that the Americans have succeeded a great deal in weakening the Russian influence in the area, which is sensitive because it potentially can create a global and regional problem. The Americans have a great interest in weakening the Russian influence. Who can tell whether or not the Americans will not transform Kosovo's independence into a bargaining card that can be used against the Russians? The US can give this card up in a future deal. During the past decade, a series of deals were made between powerful countries in which they exchanged their areas of influence. For example, the Americans can freeze their support to Kosovo's independence in exchange for a change in the Russian position towards Iran's nuclear program.
It seems that you are hinting that the independence of Kosovo is not final.
Yes, it's not final. First of all, the people of Kosovo supported independence in 1991 based on a public referendum. But the United Nations and many countries did not recognize it. In 1992, Kosovo declared its independence, but still no one recognized this independence. This time, however, the independence happened according to specific steps made by the UN. Therefore, Kosovo's independence is legitimate from the UN perspective because it happened under the people's right for self-determination. According to the UN Charter, any nation that lives on its land has the right to declare independence. Kosovo's independence is now a tangible reality. However, the recognition of Kosovo's independence and its admission into the UN will be negotiated between the US and Russia, who has a veto power at the Security Council. The coming days will tell.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV. for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.